Growing a Healthy Child, where we help busy parents grow healthy kids with less stress and more joy.
We all grew up, almost all of us, with mommies and daddies who fed us cow milk products, fed us meat, and fed us eggs, and they loved us. And we grew up perhaps learning to love some of those foods. And now, what I'm saying, and what you're saying, and what others are saying is, you know what? Mom and dad made a mistake. Those foods they fed us with love are very bad for us. Most children in this country are starting to develop atherosclerosis. It isn't the natural human diet to be eating animals or animal foods. It's just not how our bodies were created. And it's hard for people to believe that their culture is completely wrong on this issue, that all, the hamburgers and hot dogs that are celebrated in advertisements and in our culture, that cheese and other things that they eat, milk, cow's milk, which they're told builds strong bones, it's all a lie. It's all a mistake. Everybody was wrong, including mom and dad. It's hard for people to accept that.
Yeah.
And here I am telling them they're making a mistake, and they say, "Who are you?" I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nutritionist. Okay, well, I could show you lots of doctors and nutritionists who agree with me.
Mm-hmm. Carrie, it's time for Growing a Healthy Child. Hey, well, this is the podcast that helps busy parents raise healthy children with less stress and more joy. My name is Meryl Fury. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm president and CEO of PlantBased Nutrition Movement.
And my name is Carrie Bruno. I'm a pharmacist, a health coach, and a board member for Plant-Based Nutrition Movement. And our mission is to help you busy working moms and parents raise healthy kids. And for us, that all starts with delicious food that nourishes both mind and bodies. And our commitment is that your family thrives and everyone lives their best life starting now.
So, we're talking about kids, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people who watch this podcast, we believe they're parents and they have kids. Some of them don't. Maybe some of them are aunts and uncles, mm-hmm. or caregivers or their grandparents or whatever, right? Welcome. Yes, everybody. So picture this, right? There you are. It's the end of the day, or maybe it's in the weekend and it's the beginning of the day. And your little person is about to be full blown in a meltdown. They're starting, right? They're already coming unglued. It's already not going to be pretty. And your desire is to help them, what we call self-regulate, pull it together, hold it together. And it can be really hard to come up with a coherent strategy for that. Some parents also come unglued. Some parents, want to hold the child, swaddle the child, keep them calm. One thing that we've seen a lot more lately is children dealing with what's known as eco-anxiety. And that meltdown has to do with the feeling of helplessness and desperation related to what's going on with the environment, rainstorm patterns and flooding and things like this are weigh heavily on our children. It's like you might say they're just plain worried about the visible impact of climate change, just as adults are. A lot of people still deny that climate is changing or that humans have anything to do with that. But I think everybody is acutely aware of the change in weather patterns. So we're in Wisconsin, and where we used to see snow 4, 5, 6 feet deep, mm-hmm. we don't see that anymore. It's definitely changing. So whereas a kid could be having a meltdown, and that seems like a really big issue, climate change, it's a big issue to solve over the dinner table. It's still a good idea to take some time and think about it and go over with your kids what you can do as a family or as a parent, or your child as an individual. What can they do to make a difference?
Mm-hmm. And that is our question, and that's what we will answer today. We are honored to have Glen Merzer as our guest today. He is a playwright, a screenwriter, and an author of upwards of 12 books, I believe, including Food is Climate, And America Goes Vegan, America's Favorite Comfort Foods. And those are just a couple of his books. But welcome to Growing a Healthy Child.
Thank you, Carrie and Meryl. Good to be here.
Yeah, so good. This has been a long time coming.
Yes.
So glad that you're here. So tell us a little bit about your study. How did you start studying food as it relates to climate?
Yeah.
My background is that I became a vegetarian first as a teenager for my own health because there was so much heart disease in my family. And I did it on instinct. And as I got older, I did a little more research and I found that my instincts were right, except they didn't go far enough because I didn't need to be only a vegetarian. I needed to be a vegan and stop eating cheese and dairy. And I didn't put it together really with the environment until I got the opportunity to work with Howard Lyman, who was a fourth generation cattle rancher turned vegan and animal rights activist. I got the opportunity to work with him on our book, Mad Cowboy. And I learned what Howard had done to the land as a modern feedlot operator in Montana. He had inherited an organic dairy farm and he turned it into a modern feedlot operation. And he sprayed chemicals on the land. He housed the cattle close together on a feedlot. He injected them with antibiotics. It was modern chemical farming. And what he discovered was that he had destroyed the land. The land that once had been rich, loamy soil had become dry dirt. And he also discovered that the birds were disappearing and the water wasn't as clean. And he saw the impact he was having on the vegetation and the climate and the environment around him. And so I realized then that the diet I had chosen on instinct for my own health was the diet we needed for the environment too, for the planet, because animal agriculture is our leading cause of almost all the ills that are afflicting our environment. Water pollution, water waste, dead zones in the oceans, pollution in the air. And then as I learned more about it, I realized this was connected to the climate, because there are 1.5 billion cows on the earth belching methane. And methane is accounted for by the UN as being 28 times as powerful a greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide. But it's really, if we account for it more realistically, it's really 120 or 130 times as powerful, because as it's emitted into the atmosphere, it has that effect. Everybody agrees. As its instantaneous effect on the atmosphere is 130 times as potent as carbon dioxide. It's just that over time, after about 12 years, it degrades into carbon dioxide. So that's why they try to discount it. But in fact, if it's warming the atmosphere immediately, it's causing all those climate effects as it happens. And so I realized that animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change. And this unnatural activity that people do of raising animals for food is destroying the planet. And there's no need to do it because we get healthier if we eat plants instead of animals. So this is a cause of our climate disaster that's utterly pointless.
There are so many people who discount the impact of humans and our activity on the climate itself, right? They just say, how do we know? This is the same cycle it would have happened whether we were here or if we weren't here, right? How do you how do you respond to those kind of comments?
Well, if we measure the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and we're up to something like 420 parts per million. And if you look at and we know what it was in the past, we know this from ice cores and other scientific ways of measuring. So if you look at the measurement of CO2 in the atmosphere for the last 10,000 years, the graph looks like this. And then it goes right up. They call it the hockey stick graph. So why does it suddenly go up in the last 200 years, and particularly the last 100 years? And it would be foolish to think that it has nothing to do with human activity. We know that since the industrial age, we've been spewing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere from our industrial activities. But at the same time, we have increased animal agriculture many, many, many times over. There are 1.5 billion cows on the planet now. How many were there in 1750? I don't know exactly, but it wasn't anywhere near 1.5 billion. 80 billion a year that we kill. Animal agriculture has just taken over the earth. Literally, I mean, 50% of the United States is grazed. 40% of the non-ice land surface of the earth is dedicated to animal agriculture. And then there are the oceans, which are 70% of the earth. And the oceans are being destroyed by what? By fishing. So, and by the way, the fish that we catch give us 3% of our calories. So we're destroying 70% of the earth for 3% of our calories.
Wow.
Why? Because we want mercury in our bodies? It makes no sense. And so if you think about, you go back to the first Earth Day, which was in 1970. And from that point forward, for the last 50 plus years, we have talked about reducing our carbon emissions into the atmosphere. We have talked about solar power. We have talked about wind power. And we have developed a lot of solar power and wind power and clean energy. Through this attack on the environment, we've said we have to go clean, we have to go green. There's been a lot of progress on that front. That's the good news. The bad news is in 1970, on Earth Day, when we had our first Earth Day, humans were emitting about 25 billion tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And now 50 years later, we've doubled that to 50 billion tons. So at what point do we say, this isn't really working? It isn't the fault of the solar power or the wind power. That's helped a little bit. But clearly, we have to do something else. Clearly, we need another attack on the problem. And I hope young people out there will join the movement. This is a great positive thing you could do with your lives, is to go vegan and help transform this into a vegan world, because there is no way mathematically to reduce the concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere unless the world goes towards a vegan diet and we free up all that grazing land to be revegetated, to turn back into forest, to sequester the carbon dioxide and pull it down. Because otherwise, solar power, it's all to the good, but it doesn't sequester carbon dioxide. Those solar panels are good at generating electricity, but they don't pull down any carbon dioxide the way trees do.
Right.
So, I guess one question that I have, so obviously you and us and probably many others understand the connection between what we eat and climate change. And I know that there are many that do not. I recently earlier this year, did a presentation and cooking demonstration, and I wore this shirt, "Eat plants, save the world." And somebody
Mm-hmm.
came up afterwards and said, "I don't understand the connection. It doesn't make sense to me." So I explained a couple options, and I don't know that that really convinced her. But in all of your research and focus on this topic, why do you think people, or do you think people make the connection? And why don't more people see the connection? I don't understand how you don't put those two together.
You know, it's a little mystifying to me why it's so difficult to convince people to eat the foods that are healthy for their bodies and healthy for the planet. You would think that this is an easy case to make.
Mhm.
But what we're up against is culture. We all grew up, almost all of us, with mommies and daddies who fed us cow milk products and fed us meat and fed us eggs, and they loved us.
Mm-hmm.
And we grew up perhaps learning to love some of those foods. And now what I'm saying and what you're saying and what others are saying is, you know what? Mom and dad made a mistake. Those foods they fed us with love are very bad for us. Most children in this country are starting to develop atherosclerosis. So it isn't the natural human diet to be eating animals or animal foods. It's just not how our bodies were created. And it's hard for people to believe that their culture is completely wrong on this issue, that all, you know, the hamburgers and hot dogs that are celebrated in advertisements and in our culture, that cheese and other things that they eat, milk, cow's milk, which they're told builds strong bones, it's all a lie. It's all a mistake. Everybody was wrong, including mom and dad. It's hard for people to accept that.
Yeah.
And here I am telling them they're making a mistake, and they say, "Who are you?" I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nutritionist. Okay, well, I could show you lots of doctors and nutritionists who agree with me.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there's a growing movement, the plantrition movement, the lifestyle medicine movement of doctors who have the credibility that I don't have, saying the same thing I'm saying, that we're just not designed to eat animal foods. And what we're going up against is culture. You know, people go to work and everybody else at work is having the pepperoni pizza and they want to join in. They go to Thanksgiving and Aunt Sylvia made a turkey. And, you know, it's just natural and easy for people to continue making this mistake that the culture made. And you may ask, well, why did so many cultures around the world make this same mistake? And the answer is, for one thing, we only have to live long enough to reproduce for the species to go on. So, you know, heart disease doesn't usually get you in your 20s or 30s, although it can, but it's more likely to get you after you have reproduced. So a mistake that people make that limits their longevity and diminishes the quality of their lives in their 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s is not necessarily a mistake that is going to be naturally um, uh, eradicated by evolutionary forces. People can go on making that mistake and celebrate it as part of their culture and not realize that they're making a mistake. You know, we're up against culture, and we think of culture as a wonderful thing. The tourist industry is built around culture. Go around the world, sample different cultures, different cuisines. Culture is a positive word. We think of theater and dance and music and literature as all parts of culture. Well, there are wonderful parts of culture. And then there's cuisine.
Yeah.
So many cuisines around the world are destructive because they're based on eating animal foods. And we can keep those cultural traditions. Let's say, the pepperoni pizza that people eat. Well, we can still have pizza just without the pepperoni. We could even have some plant-based thing that might taste a little bit like it. We can have tacos just without beef, with rice and beans and so forth. So we can keep these cuisines. We just have to adapt them to health.
Yeah, it is so wrapped up in so many ways. And then we have our government promoting the animal agriculture industry and the importance of milk building strong bones 12 different ways, or whatever it says,
Right.
in the schools, posters all over, with the milk mustache and everything. It is the cultural part is relentless. So I have somewhere between 3 and 5 kids, depends how I count them. I have 2 I birthed biologically, one that I just claim because I love her to pieces, and she claims me too. And then I periodically adopt people,
I see. I see.
My family expands and contracts a lot. But the time that we get to spend with our children and teaching them how to eat, teaching them how to be in the world is precious, precious, valuable time. I sincerely hope, and I think our goal with this podcast is to get parents to see food from a very different perspective.
Yeah.
So how are your kids' eating habits? Do they tend to eat more fat, sugar, or salt than you would like or is recommended? Do they seem to prefer fast foods and processed convenient products over fruits and vegetables that you can prepare at home? Do you ever struggle to create healthy meals only to have them refuse to eat them? And worst of all, does your dinner table ever turn into a battleground? If you find yourself in these situations faced with these questions, believe me, we feel you, and you're not alone.
Wouldn't it be great if you were part of an active, well-informed, supportive community, working to transform how we feed our kids so we can make a difference for them and for the planet as a whole? Well, you can. That community actually exists.
It's a thing already.
It's plant-based nutrition movement. That's what that is. Join us and get involved. Become a member. There's no cost to join. Also, check out our Facebook page and connect with other people just like you. Join the 6 Million Seeds Coalition or launch a 6 Million Seeds project in your area. Contact us at 6mseeds@pbnm.org to get in touch or to learn more.
So let's say you have a young person in your vicinity and you have the opportunity to talk to them along the lines of health. One of the things that we know for sure, I mentioned this earlier, is that children are suffering from like eco-anxiety. And this is the anxiety that is all about the state of our ecology and the planet and the climate change and the natural disasters. Right now, there are fires raging in Hawaii, right? Which has never seen such things outside of volcanic activity. So if you had a child or a young person in your vicinity and you were going to talk to them about this, what might you say to them? What might you encourage them to do?
Well, I would say that the best way to fight anxiety is to have a purpose, to be doing something, not just worrying about something. And the beauty of the solution that we all propose, which is an evolution to a plant-based diet, is that it's something that you can do with 3 meals a day, every time you're eating. And you could also do it every time you're getting together with friends and everyone's deciding where to go to eat. And you could do it in more involved ways, like I write books and you have your podcast and so forth. So people could get as involved as they wish to get in this movement to have a transformation of the world in which people eat human food. Um, and so it, whether somebody decides to choose it as a vocation, let's say become a doctor and encourage one's patients to go on a plant-based diet, or become a nutritionist, or become an environmentalist, or get involved with restoring forests, or even if it isn't a vocation. Let's say somebody wants to be a guitarist. They don't want to spend their lives dealing with nutrition. Okay, but be a guitarist, but be a vegan guitarist, and encourage your friends to go plant-based. And so people could join this cause. And when you join a cause, I think that relieves some of the anxiety, because you're doing something. And this is the only thing that will work. As I said, from Earth Day to now, 50 years, the first Earth Day to now, 50 years later, we've doubled the annual greenhouse gas emissions. What we're doing isn't working. It will not work. It's good to move towards green technologies. It's good to move towards clean generation of energy. It is not sufficient. It will never work if that's the only strategy. We have to stop chopping down the Amazon for cows. We have to stop deforestation for animal agriculture. We have to return as much of the earth to nature as we can. And the analogy I like to use is that if you have an injury and you go to the doctor and he dresses the wound, the doctor will say, leave it alone and it will heal. Mm-hmm. We are self-healing mechanisms. The doctor never says, take this arm home and scratch it all day long. Yeah. No. You leave it alone and it will heal. It's the same with the earth. Imagine if we could leave 80% of the earth alone and it would heal. And people would say, but 80% of the earth, I mean, we got 8 billion people. We have roads and bridges, and we have to have civilization. Well, that's just on a small fraction of the earth. We could still leave 80% of the earth alone. How do we do it? We stop eating fish to start with. We stop eating fish. That means leaving the oceans alone. That's 70% of the earth right there. Just stop eating fish. Replace that 3% of your calories. By the way, we feed more fish to the cows than we do to people.
Which is totally.
You might not have known that cows were our leading ocean predator. But stop eating fish. Now we've left 70% of the earth alone. Of course, we'll still have some commercial shipping and pleasure craft on the oceans and so forth. But most of the damage to the oceans is being done by the fishing industry. So we stop eating fish. We've left 70% of the earth alone. Then we stop eating other animals. We stop eating cows and pigs and chickens. And we free up more than 40% of the land surface of the earth. You add it all together, that's over 80% of the earth, just by stopping eating animals. We free up all that land. We save the oceans. And then the earth can heal. And then we can still have our cars and airplanes if we do that. I don't think we're going to have solar airplanes anytime soon. So we can still have modern civilization as we know it. We should try to make it as clean as possible. If we're eating a plant-based diet, we could feed 8 billion people, or 9 billion people, or 10 billion people, and then hopefully we hit a plateau. And we could stop having these terrible wildfires and these over time, these terrible storms, terrible floods. All that will be mitigated if we eat a human diet. I don't think it's too much to ask that human beings eat human food.
Mm,
Mhm.
mm,
If in my fantasy tomorrow the world transformed to a vegan diet and we stopped having animal agriculture, I think within decades, within a decade or two, we would see a dramatic reversal of the problems we're having. My friend Dr. Silas Rao likes to say everything improves when you stop eating animals.
mm.
People's health improves, the vegetation returns, the water cycles improve, the carbon cycles improve, the oceans improve, everything improves.
Yeah. So I heard you say that you believe trees are our best hope.
Yeah.
And I think we've kind of been saying that in so many ways. But if a child were to take those words and want to do something real with them, what would you suggest a child do?
First, adopt a whole foods vegan diet, because understand that when you do that, you're increasing the potential that the world will have more trees. Second, if it interests you, get involved with farming or gardening, or environmental causes where they plant trees in urban areas, in suburban areas, in rural areas. So, there are all kinds of things a young person could do to get involved, if to the extent that they want to get involved. But everybody can do the easy thing, which is eat human food, get healthy.
Our only goal, and I'm sure it's your goal too, is that the children don't have to deal with these chronic illnesses, right? That they live as long as their parents and their great parents, and they live healthy, productive lives. That's really all any parent wants for their kids, right? That they don't have to struggle with diabetes or high blood pressure or any of that. And the best way to do that is eat healthy human food.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it changes everything else,
It
like climate
really
and all
does.
those things rolled
Yeah.
together. So,
Right. For sure. For sure.
yeah.
Well, Glenn, I think we've about covered this subject. Please hold up your book. The one we're talking about
Yeah.
mostly is,
Well, this one is on the climate.
okay,
Food is
hold it,
climate.
hold it back just about like that.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah. And this is my latest book, which is called America Goes Vegan.
Tell us a little bit about what's going on with that book. What's
Yeah.
in there?
Well, that book, I wrote about 7 chapters, I think, and then Tracy Childs, who is a culinary wizard, did the recipes, and the recipes are all based on taking American comfort foods like mac and cheese and burgers and turning them healthy and vegan.
Mm.
So I wrote chapters about the many reasons why we should do this, and then the recipes are right there to make it easy to do. And so America Goes Vegan is really meant to be a kind of a helpful book to help people make this transition, which my point is it's not so difficult. I know a lot of people think it's very daunting to go vegan. It's only daunting because of Aunt Sylvia and the Thanksgiving turkey. That's the reason it's daunting. If you can deal with Aunt Sylvia and the Thanksgiving turkey, you're good, because the food is easy.
Yeah.
I mean, there are different, there are some chefs who make really, sensational, intricate vegan dishes. Okay. But you can open a can of beans, you could boil water and make rice. You could make oatmeal. It's not that difficult.
Right.
So these foods are not so difficult to prepare. They're not so expensive. A can of beans is not expensive. And you just have to get your vegetables and, eat your leafy greens. And there are all kinds of cookbooks out there. There are YouTube channels like Chef AJ's, and I've started a YouTube channel too. All kinds of channels where you can get information, all kinds of vegan books out there, and it just isn't that hard. It's not hard. You don't have to worry about protein. It's very good to eat legumes at least once a day, beans, peas, lentils. And mushrooms are terrific foods. And you really won't miss anything, except you won't be going to the doctor so often, and you won't be needing hospitals.
Right.
So, who misses that?
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah, I like the concept of that book though, because like we were talking about culture earlier, I think it's difficult for some to make the transition when they're thinking all of these foods are unfamiliar to them. But if you take recipes that they're familiar with and just maybe tweak them a little bit, I think that's a good step for some.
Right. I mean, most people like potatoes.
Yeah.
Potatoes are hard not to like,
We
right?
love potatoes.
And I particularly love blue, like purple sweet potatoes. Anything that you eat that's blue is terrific.
Right.
Blueberries. What are some other blue foods?
There's not a lot of blue
Yeah, really
foods.
like
There.
Purple cabbage.
Yeah, blackberries.
Yeah, blackberries. Anything in that
dark
family, I
grapes.
like that. Blue
Yeah.
is my favorite color.
Yeah.
So, but there are all kinds of potatoes, sweet potatoes, all kinds of varieties of them. And the key is, it's what Dr. McDougall likes to call starch.
Mhm.
The key is to eat those foods that are satiating, like the potato, like corn, like oats, oatmeal. So you eat those satiating foods, because if you decide that's it, I'm going to go vegan, and you eat nothing but lettuce all day, you're going to get hungry.
That's a challenge.
Not going to go well.
Yeah, you're going to get hungry. You want to eat your vegetables, you want to eat your greens, but you don't rely on them to make you feel satiated. You rely on the potatoes, on the beans, on the starchy foods. And then when you do that, it's easy.
Yeah. The other part that I think people struggle with is that in this last generation or so, people have not learned how to cook. They just kind of don't know. A lot of it is, I'll just go to the drive-through or the restaurant or pick it up. It's already in a can, it's frozen, it's in a bag, whatever. And I'll just do the quick version of that. And so many people associate cooking with hardship and taking too much time. So, to have a set of recipes that are already figured out and that match what you want for a flavor profile is very, very valuable. The other thing I would add too is that we got to remember, when we're eating fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts, seeds, mushrooms, all that, food is medicine, right? Food is what I've heard so many times in the last week. Food is information. It informs our bodies how to respond. It can actually make differences in how our genetic codes are manifested, right? How they play out. And using the whole foods like that, give your body the information it needs to stay healthy, so that your body knows, oh yeah, okay, I know what to do with vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, right? I know what to do with that. When we're adding the chemicals and the petrochemicals and the weird stuff, the body doesn't know what to do with those. And it makes us sick instead.
Right.
Also with food, I'm only telling you guys already know this. Herbs are medicinal. Herbs actually have properties.
They do.
Actually, right? So eating this way is, I'm going to say, the best way to give your body what it needs to stay healthy. there are some other, certainly other facets of health that are important also, like sleep and not smoking and not, you know, being in stress all the time. But food is something you do every day, at least generally
Yeah.
3 times a day.
Exactly.
That can inform your body how to stay healthy.
Right. We need to view eating as having something to do with nourishing our bodies. Yes, it's also about pleasure. So the recipes are good, and I love my food.